Hello and welcome to Circle Time, the Early Years podcast with me, Glenn Denny. Joining me on this week's podcast is the owner of a nursery, author, and an advocate, I suppose, as well for men in early years, as I've read his book. It's David Wright. David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Glenn. Great to be with you.
Brilliant. So, David, tell us a little bit about your background. So, how come you do what you do? Because going from my own background as a man in early years, it's not that common yet. Still, we're still quite the minorities. How did you come to be in it?
Well, I would completely agree with you. My route into early years was something that I've picked up with quite a number of men, which is either through a contact, a relative, or a friend who typically it's a woman and they are the gatekeepers into Magic Kingdom. So, I had a previous career in IT. My wife started a preschool in our home, which then outgrew that. And together we established a business, which eventually grew to 10 settings, day nurseries and preschools and out of school clubs. Mm-hmm. And I left my highly paid job in IT to come and earn a pittance with running early years settings. Prior to that, we both had a passion for working with children and appreciated the difference that you could make in them. And that's what is the fulfilling part of our job, isn't it? Knowing that you have that opportunity to build those fantastic relationships, to see children progress and to be a part of that journey.
Absolutely. I think that's why it's kept me going as well. I mean, we were saying just before we started recording, I've been doing this for about 25 years. And I think you summed it up exactly there. It's knowing that you're making a difference and that you're having a positive influence on that child's life that kind of keeps you going, because with all the best will in the world and all the best employers in the world, there's never going to be a great deal of money to be made out of early years and working in early years. But I think it's that sense of achievement that you're making a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the sad thing is that there are so few men in the sector, and that, somebody was asking me the other day, why aren't men coming? And personally, I think, number one, they're not asked, but mm-hmm. Number two, they've got absolutely no idea it is a valid career for men, that they are welcome, and actually it's such a fulfilling thing to do. And, part of that goes back to our society's views about, gender roles, about what's appropriate for people who are female, male, or whatever else.
Yes.
And, that shouldn't be a barrier in today's society. We need the best people to work with our children, and we need the widest spectrum of character types. We need to get that message out there, I think, to men, to say, look, this is a fantastic place to be, and you are very welcome. But that is a huge mountain to climb. And also, we've got to bear in mind, there's a lot of suspicion about men who work mm-hmm. or even show an interest in other people's children. And that is the huge elephant in the room. And that is difficult for men because, mm-hmm. As a man, you are having to defend your position of doing that role. And, it's that suspicion that then stops men from coming into it, because you're thinking, whoa, what could happen to me here? And again, I just think we need to normalize these things. And I think where I've seen it being a success, it is that I'm just another person who works in this nursery, in this preschool with these children. And once parents get to know you as a person, and you're not some mysterious man who, has suspect, they have concerns about you. He's a superhero to my son, my daughter, and on we go.
I mean, that echoes so much to my own career. I mean, I've worked in several different nurseries, and every single one, apart from the setting I work in now, I've always had an issue with the parent that, well, I don't want him changing my child's name.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew as soon as I said that would echo with you.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want you changing my child's nap. But I mean, one of the settings I worked in, we had a parent who wanted to remove their child purely because I was going to work there, because never even met me. I hadn't even started. This was even before I'd started. And they were like, I don't want a man changing my child's nappy. Well, fine, okay, whatever.
Isn't that outright discrimination?
Yeah.
Just...
But I mean, the manager and the deputy basically stood up for me before I'd even started,
Right.
and went, that's fine, take the child out.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, simple as. And in the end, she left the child there. And then when eventually the child moved up to preschool, which is where I was working, obviously I had to be involved in changing the child's nap. That child absolutely became my best friend. And I think it showed that, you know, she was wrong. And I think, you know, when I came to leave that setting, she was like, thank you for everything you've done. It was like, nearly didn't happen. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think this could be a debate that we could go on, you know, throughout the whole thing. But I think let's be positive about it. Let's talk about, you know, what it means and what we do. And, you know, we were talking briefly as well about pedagogy as well, and, you know, what our curriculum is. You know, what does that mean for you?
Well, I think they're very interesting themes to explore because they are so prevalent in all discussions around early years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that we all have a common understanding of what that means, particularly when we're referring to the new EYFS, which is quite old now.
Mm-hmm.
People get very hung up on what it is we're supposed to be teaching children, how we're assessing that, and you know what we need to back up those decisions that we've made, or those assessments of children's development.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, about how we should be running our day, how we should be teaching children. And you know, we can. It's very. I did some research recently on the history of early childhood education in England, going back sort of to the 1870s, moving forward, and not a lot has changed. It's incredible. You can go back the start of the 1900s and sent inspectors out into schools to say, you know, what's going on here? We've said children from 5 to 13 are supposed to be educated. We've got children younger than that appearing in classrooms. That's not an appropriate place for them. Mm. They were herded out of the classes and told it was inappropriate for them to learn by rote, for them to be directly instructed, that they needed to do something else. But then nothing was put in place for those children. Yeah. And you jump forward to the 1930s, and I think it's the Harrow report was saying what children under 5 needed. It was all the things that we would deem to be best practice these days. So learning through play, exploratory learning, lots of outdoor activity, children not being made to sit down for long so they could choose for themselves what activities they wanted to do, all those kinds of things. That was in 1930. And then we jump forward, still no provision, right up until the 1970s. It was first mentioned in Parliament. Even then, the funding didn't come through. So they had a couple of starts at it, and then the voucher system came in, and they dismissed that. And there was some funding, and eventually we roll forward to where we are today. And we know that funding isn't what it should be in terms of providing for children, providing salaries for people to, you know, as professional teachers. Within that, I think, you know, the EYFS itself and the 7 areas of learning, and particularly the 3 key areas, are great because that gives us that structure and a clear understanding of what children need in order to develop. We still have that pressure being brought to bear in education in general, I think, that numeracy and literacy are key, and those are the things we can measure. And my take on it is, you know, if somebody says, what do you want your children to know? What do you want them to learn? What is the whole purpose of education and school? I wouldn't have said it was exclusively maths and English. You know, and we're very clear in the early years that we have a holistic view of the child. But beyond that, I think we have to ask that question, what is a child? Because everything should be centered and focused on the child. But in terms of curriculum, what is it we want for children? And I wrote about this a while back, and I put, let's jump forward to the end of life. When we're talking about someone after they've gone, we don't say they had a fantastic maths and English GCSE.
Yeah.
The last thing on our mind, isn't it? The things we remember about people are they were kind. They might have been inventive. They might have been a social activist. They might have helped people. They might have been loving. They had a family. Those are the things that matter in terms of humanity. And to my mind, that's as much of the curriculum as maths, English, and the impartation of knowledge.
Oh,
yes,
definitely.
those things are important in terms of getting a job, in terms of being able to access, communication generally, and therefore fit in with society. But over and above that, it's what you're like as a person that matters, to my mind. And I think that is far more important than just the academic things, particularly the younger the age.
Mm-hmm.
And we now know, neuroscience tells us about how children develop, and that importance of self-regulation, the importance of attachment and feeling good about yourself and having that sense of self-worth, self-identity, being able to relate to other people. And to me, those are far greater importance than knowing how to read and write. I'm not dismissing those.
No.
What I'm saying is we need to rebalance the curriculum.
I think there's that bit as well. Like you say, that there is the importance of like our learning in terms of like numeracy and literacy and all that. But there's a time and a place for it. And like the early years isn't that place to be sitting learning specifically, right, today we are going to count 1 to 10. They're not going to, they can do that through their play, and that's what it's about, really, isn't it? Is that children should be free to play, to explore, to actually find their feet in the world. There's so much going on and everything moves at 100 miles an hour. Actually, we should be slowing it down. We should be allowing children that time and that space to explore in their own way.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And the other aspect of that, if we go back to the principles of the EYFS, the 4 principles, the 2 key ones of me are the unique child and positive relationship.
Yes.
And all teaching is relational. It involves somebody teaching and somebody learning. And teaching and learning implies that there is a relationship there. Now, sometimes that looks like a teacher imparting knowledge. So that could be an adult-led activity. But sometimes it's that scaffolding which extends children's learning based on, whatever their interests are, whatever their activities are. Exactly as you said, they are the ones who should be leading their learning, and we should be the ones who follow that and build on it to give them the encouragement, validation, and additional knowledge that then extends that. But really, for me, it's about children building their mental model of the world. Is the world an exciting and joyous place that I can feel confident in and go out and be myself? And as I always say to anyone working in the sector, you don't know who you've got the privilege of building that relationship with. It's very interesting that our new Prime Minister used to live just not far from my house, and his mum owned the pharmacy at the top of our road. It's literally 5 minutes up the road from where we are, and I know somebody who used to look after him in a nursery. So, he would never have dreamt.
You're going to look after a future Prime Minister,
You just don't know, do you? But that could be somebody who's going to invent the next thing that's going to solve world health issues, the next COVID vaccine. It could be somebody who's going to be the best footballer in the world, the next musician. the next person to do whatever. And our job is to find that, or help those children find what it is that excites them about the world, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, I think as well, it's like you were talking about relational theory and things like that there. It's important as well, like, you know, these young children are coming to our care. And I think that's the important word that sometimes we move away from, is care, that we are there to support them. We are there to care for them. We are there to help grow their confidence and their ability to socialize with others, not just other children, but other adults as well, and to build that confidence. If they don't have that firm foundation of confidence and security in themselves and other people, then how can they move on to become the next prime minister or the next inventor of a COVID vaccine? You know, that there's so much that, you know, needs to be done before any kind of formalized teaching needs to come in.
Yes, that's right. And in terms of definitions, you know, that distinction between curriculum and pedagogy, I always put it in very simple terms. Curriculum is what we teach the children, but as we've just discussed, what it's as wide as you want it to be, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the pedagogy is the relational bit for me. It's how do we see that child? What is our relationship to that child, and how are we going to teach and deliver the curriculum to them? And as you've said, that's about care. It's about nurture. It's about respect and tolerance and inclusion, and honouring that child's capital culture, their background, you know, where they've come from, and their family, and beyond that, and having that broadest view of what the curriculum looks like, because sometimes it can be distilled down to, you know, very bland, we're just churning this through type things. And the excitement for me and the wonder is when children see something new, or bring in something from home that is unfamiliar to us. You know, let's all learn together about this. Let's extend our own knowledge. And that's the excitement of early years for me.
Definitely.
And I'll never forget that for those children, sometimes this is the first time they've ever done whatever it is. You know, when you get to my age, I've had over 60 Christmases, but I always remember one little boy saying, someone said to him, well, it's going to be Christmas again. And he said, what, again? Just the excitement that there will possibly be another Christmas. And I just think we lose that at our peril. It's that joy and wonder that something so phenomenal as last Christmas could happen again. You know, isn't that the wonder of childhood?
Absolutely, like that surprise on their face. It was a question I was going to ask you then. So we were talking about, you know, you mentioned it just at the start there about, you know, how curriculum and pedagogy can be misunderstood. Do you think as well the word curriculum, I mean, it's one I don't like.
Yeah.
Curriculum can be misunderstood even by members of our own profession, that to them curriculum is the EYFS. This is what you must teach. And, you know, do you think sometimes we need to just literally throw that away, or even change the word, you know, curriculum, to make it understood better?
Yes, I think people get very hung up on terminology. And I think words themselves can be very loaded, you know, because our view of curriculum is probably what we went through in primary, secondary school, which for some people wasn't a great experience. Yeah, we can all think of examples of that. Those people who gave up geography early on, or whatever it was. You're right. And I think in that sense, it can be restricting and also intimidating. You know, one of the things people worry about is being inspected, someone coming in and saying, what are you teaching the children? And then panicking about, you know, them using that terminology. So what's your curriculum in your nursery? And I think we have to be really confident about knowing who our children are and what we're doing with them, and, you know, not be restricted by conforming to what other people think or we believe a curriculum should be. I think you're right. If we could change the term, that would really be helpful.
I think so. It is that bit where you do get hung up, and really, like you said there, it's the child is at the center of what we do, and they are the curriculum because they bring what they want to learn in with them, and that's where we should go. That's our starting point.
And I think the only thing we have to be careful about is that we are seeing children develop.
Mm,
And again, that's fine if you're experienced because you kind of know where you would expect children of a particular age to be at, and to know those that need some additional support get there. But you know, a lot of the things that we do, particularly around language, I always use the example of singing. So if we have an activity, a music activity,
mm,
everybody gets something out of it, whether they're good at speaking or not. You know, that repetition of language, getting everyone to join in physically. There'll be some people who will stand on the edge and listen. There'll be some people who might do a couple of activities. There'll be some people, you know, perhaps English isn't their first language, that they'll start to just get used to the sound of those words. It's all helping all of them. You know, no one's losing out if you're singing Bar Bar Black Sheep for the 100th time,
yeah.
are they? And I think, you know, sometimes we feel like we've got to, you know, differentiate things so much that it all becomes a bit overwhelming. And I just think, let's join everybody in to do what we're doing, and those that need some extra support, we can give them that time, because that's what we do during the week anyway, isn't it? You know, we
Mm.
try and find time for particular individuals and tailor what we do. But yeah, I think we've got to be careful about what we mean by curriculum, and it's good to have that discussion as a team, isn't it? You
Yeah,
know,
definitely.
you
Yeah,
know, I don't know how you plan with your children, how that works on a daily basis.
so for us, we do in the moment planning, and
Yeah,
I find that so beneficial. This is probably the first setting I've worked in where this is all we've ever done. I mean, the setting I work in now has only been open for 2 years. I mean, amazing opening a nursery in the middle of a pandemic, brilliant. But they've done it, and you know it's become successful. But it's one of these things where we take a child's interest, or we set up an invitation, and you know, if a child's interested in, then we'll set up a provocation and we'll move it on from there. But again, it's we watch the children, but we have that relationship with our children.
yeah,
You know, we had our inspection recently. We had Ofsted come in and do our inspection because we were due, and we took them down to forest school. We're quite lucky in my setting, we have a forest school, and we took the inspectors down with us. I said, well,
right,
come down and see what we do. You know, it's humanizing inspectors, because again, sometimes that can put the fear into people. It's like, oh, it's Ofsted are coming, they're people, you know.
yeah,
So we took them down, and they were asking us about our children. It's like, you know, where's this one at? It's like, but because we had that relationship, because we weren't bogged down with tons and tons of paperwork or ticking boxes on EYFS, because we did in the moment planning, we knew what our children liked and weren't too good at and what we were working on. We were able to say, oh, well, you know, he really, really likes this, but he needs a bit of work on this. And that's what we're doing this for. And, you know, so it was able to tell the inspectors, we didn't necessarily have to have physical evidence.
no,
They asked us questions, we answered them. You know, that was it. That was our evidence. But it was down to that relationship we had with our children, that we knew them, and those children were confident with us. But equally, because our children were confident with us, they were also confident around the inspectors, and they would come up and talk to them. And that was just another example of how, you know, we should be building those strong bonds and strong relationships with our children.
yeah, completely agree, Glenn. Well, that's really encouraging to hear, and so many inspections I hear now are being run along those lines. You know, Ofsted have made it very clear they don't want to see paperwork, they don't want lots of record held, but exactly as you have said, the evidence is in the children, the evidence is in those relationships, and you're confident in knowing where your children are at and what their next steps are. And that sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, certainly
it's
goes
one of
along with
these
my
as
view.
well. I think it's again, I think we lose sight of the word play, and like it gets blurred. And really, like, play is curriculum. You know, it is
Yes.
the child's curriculum, and
Yeah.
I think that's important where we make that link. It's like the child is playing. Yes, that's because that's what children do, but they're playing as we view it is them experimenting with the world.
Yeah. And it's again another one of those loaded terms. We all have a view of what that word means, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, you know, when children on into school, they have playtime, which is
Yes,
different from learning time. And even in, you know, that definition there's an implication that it's not proper, it's not educational in that sense.
it's not important,
Yes, yeah,
but it is. We know it
exactly
is.
that. And children are great at leading their own learning, and that happens first and foremost during play, doesn't it? You know, that's
Absolutely.
exactly as you said, when they're engaging with their world, they're, you know, developing their social skills, their investigative skills, their problem solving skills, their imagination. All of those things can happen with children playing, and that is the best place for that to happen, isn't it? Because they're having fun at the same time. But they're free to explore in the widest sense.
Definitely.
It's not prescribed for them. It's not, you will sit down and learn this, and I'm going to pass this information over to you.
I know, and I think, I mean, I've worked in settings where that's, you know, back in the dark ages when I started doing this, it was you had to plan. And sometimes we plan months in advance, and I've even worked in a setting where we did so much planning that we had boxes of each topic. You know, oh, remember the good old topic days? Oh goodness!
Yes.
And it's like, you know, this is why we develop as practitioners as well, to think, did we actually do that? Oh yes, we did. But we'd take down the box of topics and we'd just regurgitate it all over again. And, you know, so the children would get something from it, but would they actually get enough to justify doing it that way? Or should we have just opened the doors and say, right, what are we going to do today? What do you want to do?
Yes. I mean, my view of the role of the adult is it's about getting that balance right. You know, children don't know what they don't know. And so we are the resource for that.
Yeah.
But equally, they need to be, you know, agents of their own learning. They need to have that agency to build that confidence and that lifelong learning skills. And, you know, those characteristics of effective learning are kind of put on one side often, aren't they? But they're central to who a child is and what they're going to be like as an adult. You know, if you want children to problem solve later on in life, they've got to start that when they're a baby. You know, they've got to want to extend them. It's got to come from within rather than, you know, something that's enforced on them. Otherwise, education is a complete turn-off by the time you get to the age of 5, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we don't want that. You know, so going back to where I started from, at the end of life, you want someone who's led a fulfilled life because they had a zest for learning, they enjoyed life to the fullest, you know, they wanted sport, they enjoyed music, they had a family that they related to and made good relationships all the way through. But all of those things come back to early years, don't they?
Absolutely.
You know, and if we've got issues in the world, which we surely have now, isn't the best place to sort those things out in the early years. But hey, we have governments to convince of that. I don't think we need to, do we?
Well, you know, governments, yeah, when they get themselves sorted, we might be able to convince them. But, you know, if it changes every 5 minutes, you just don't know. David, I just want to say thank you so much for talking to me. It's been absolutely brilliant. Fantastic discussion. Love to have you back on again, especially, you know, we kind of touched on the topic of men in early years, and it's something I would love to explore again with you sometime soon.
Yeah, I'd love to. It's been a real pleasure. Great to speak to you, Glenn.
Thank you. Don't forget, you can listen into our podcast anytime you like. And if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, just send us an email. It's postoffice@circletimepodcast.co.uk. From me, Glenn Denny, thanks for listening.